Travis Wayne Goodsell. I came across Exmo Lex's latest video. She's so cute! Reasons why Brigham Young sucked. So the first 4 minutes, she lists the types of wives that Brigham Young had, and she missed one category of women. They're not really wives. These were just concubines or harlots. They were the prostitutes in the Regent Street brothel. She did not know about that either. Most Mormons don't know about that. I didn't know about that. It was when I came across a guy doing a video tour of Regent Street, talking about it, and so I did some more research, and sure enough, it was a brothel. Even the Salt Lake City mayor was talking about the street and the history. Would not make the connection. Just hilarious. And so it's not to talk about Brigham Young's promiscuousness in this video, but more of why the Mormons don't know about any of this. Why is it that I grew up not having a clue? You'd think it still exists, right? No, that's the whole point. It didn't. It stopped existing. Why did it stop existing? How did it stop existing? What happened in history that caused Mormons at that time to sweep everything of history under the rug and carry on in a new direction, a hinge point? As President Eyring said, the church is now doing under Nelson. It's because of the Edmunds-Tucker Act. The Edmunds-Tucker Act was after Brigham Young died, but the Edmunds-Tucker Act punished the church for practicing polygamy. In order to be a state in the United States again, well, not again, for the first time. Remember, Brigham Young abandoned the United States, fled the country. The whole pioneer trek is all about fleeing the United States. Now, you can hear Mormons, we talk about, the extermination order from Governor Boggs of Missouri, or Illinois, or Missouri, isn't it? But, no. That order came as a result of the Danites within the church that had Joseph Smith murdered, after having him arrested over and over and over again for false allegations. And so Brigham Young took his Danites and the women who were extorted to go with them if they wanted to have a life, because back in those days women didn't have the freedoms like Exmo Lex does. You're supposed to have a husband to take care of you. People didn't take kindly to a woman taking care of herself, and especially if she had kids, because, she's promiscuous. She's a heathen, a whore. And so women needed a man to take care of them and any children especially. And so that's why Brigham Young was able to convince many of the Mormon women to go with them. And they had to do him a favor, though, and get married to either Joseph Smith posthumously or to Brigham Young, Heber C. Kimball, if they were of their liking, I would imagine. and if they were of breeding capacity. I'm not quite sure that Brigham Young would have taken women who were not of his liking and not of breeding capacity. So understand the horrors that you don't imagine anymore because of the civil rights movement that occurred in the United States in the 60s is out of sight, out of mind now. And so that's another reason why we don't fully grasp the horrors of Brigham Young. And so the United States, as they added more states to the Union going west, the states had to comply with the United States and the United States Constitution. So no polygamy. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was practicing polygamy, and they refused to stop. And they had made Utah a territory first, allowed Brigham Young to be governor. Do you understand that? Do you understand that when Brigham Young settled in Mexico here, he turned it into the Kingdom of Deseret, not the state of Deseret. This was not a united state. He fled the country. This was Mexico, and he created the Kingdom of Deseret. He was king of Deseret. The United States came in, made this a territory. They did not have to do any official thing as they did for making a territory into a state. They claimed the territory, and it became part of the United States as a territory, like Puerto Rico or some islands in the Pacific, etc. They're just territories. Washington, D.C. is just a territory of the United States. It's not an official state. And so Brigham Young was king. But when the United States came in, turned it into a territory, they allowed him to be governor. And he refused to comply with the Constitution and the United States of America's laws, and so they dethroned him as governor as well, and had to place governors on the governor seat over and over and over again because Mormons ran them out of town. So when you look up the list of governors, you'll notice there's a whole ton that served for a short period of time during Brigham Young's lifetime. That's because Mormons were chasing them out, and so this needed to stop. You can't have insurrection in the United States. The Mormons were insurrect and practicing polygamy, running out government officials from the land, trying to rig the courts with judges and the legislature so that they can make their own laws separate from the United States and the Constitution. And they justify it by saying, "Oh, you guys killed Joseph Smith," even though it was Willard Richards who shot Joseph Smith in the back, and John Taylor who murdered Hiram Smith under the orders of Brigham Young and Heber C. Kimball, who had got some of the Warsaw Lodge Scottish Rites Masons to come down as the mob, but they didn't do it. I go over this in the video about the actual murder of Joseph Smith. And so, Brigham Young had Joseph Smith murdered, got Mormons into believing that it was the United States that murdered him, and therefore the United States was the enemy, and we needed to take down the enemy one day and establish the Kingdom of Deseret. So that's why they're here in Utah. That's why they have no intention of going back to Missouri, as Brigham Young tried to burn down. I think he actually did burn down the Missouri, the Nauvoo Temple, and that was the temple he put his inverted pentagrams on of the Scottish Rites Illuminati, and instead put the inverted pentagrams on the Salt Lake Temple and the Seagull Gate, which points directly at the state capitol as you look through the gate. And so, yeah, Lucifer, and that's his god. But he turned. Okay, we're doing fine. He turned the Mormon thinking on its upside down, and created Adam as Heavenly Father. So created a brand new god for Mormons to worship, and started polygamy and the brothels that Exmo has left out, and had blood atonement to justify murder. And so that's why you see his section 132, his section 132. I have to keep going over this because Brigham Young wrote it, not Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith had the Book of Mormon 3 times, no polygamy. In his Doctrine and Covenants from 1835, 2 passages of monogamy, no polygamy. And it was Brigham Young who took out the one on marriage and took out the parts in section 131 about monogamy would exalt that one couple. And so Brigham Young replaced those, put in section 132. So that when the United States came and said, you can't practice polygamy anymore, you can't even discuss it, and the church kept practicing it, and the Reed-Smoot hearings occurred, as the church had to put in their temples the law of chastity as it was worded before Nelson changed it, as Nelson's changed it back to allow polygamy. But before then, it was specific, according to legally and lawfully wedded, which complied with the United States for monogamy. The church still practiced bigamy, which is different than polygamy, and I had 2 bigamy counts against the church in my lawsuit because I was married twice. So I got to put 2 counts for bigamy against the church on that. And by the way, I did win. It's just the judge abandoned the case when she got fired. Her last day, she just left and didn't give a final order. So there's nothing to be done now. But I won because the lawyers for the church were 24 days in default and had no justifiable excuse. That's an automatic loss. According to the federal laws, they lost. So when the church was disobedient, the Reed-Smoot happened after the Edmunds-Tucker Act. The Edmunds-Tucker Act, as a punishment, confiscated all of the church's assets. And since Brigham Young had his own kingdom, everything belonged to the church. The tobacco plantation, the brewery. But wait a minute, didn't Brigham Young make it a commandment for the word of wisdom? Yeah. He still grew tobacco. He still had a brewery for the brothels. They needed beer. And so, yeah, the brothels and all that stuff, just like your Deadwood town. And with the confiscation of the government, they couldn't confiscate the temples because those were religious entities. But all of the church's businesses, the Temple Square buildings that they had already, all of those confiscated. The church had to go into debt to try to rent them back. And so that's why they didn't rent back the brothels, they didn't rent back the brewery, they didn't rent back the tobacco industry. and those other types of things, because they wanted to maintain the church organization as a higher priority than the business aspects, the commerce street aspects of the organization. And so the church goes deep into debt. Lorenzo Snow comes along, gets this great revelation in St. George. Hey, let's do what the crime organizations do in the United States and demand protection money from the Mormons to get us out of debt. We'll call it tithing. And it's 10% of income rather than 10% of interest annually, and it's now a requirement for temple worthiness. It's like they've never even read the passage about the rich Zoramites. The passage was just done by the Book of Mormon videos on YouTube. So you can bring it back up on how the poor Zoramites were denied entrance into their synagogues, as they called them, with the Rameumptom, because they were poor. They had built them, and after they built them, they weren't getting paid for any construction work because the buildings were built, and thus they were poor. And the rich Zoramites, who were the farm owners, still got money in. They were rich. People need food to live. And so they decided, hey, if you're not rich, you're poor. And if you're poor, that means you're unworthy because you're a lazy bum, slacker, whatever, trying to get welfare from this coronavirus. I mean, am I applying the scriptures? Am I likening the scriptures unto our day? Yes, I am. So understand, that's why Mormons have no clue about any of the crimes, corruption, abuses, murders, sexual perversions of Brigham Young, is because they swept it all under the rug of history as the United States government silenced them. And then offshoots emerged, like the FLDS Church, saying that the church is evil for caving to the government. The government will not replace us. And thus you have Warren Jeffs now in prison for raping 14-year-old girls and the SNAP fraud violation that they were able to get them caught for. So yes, the church still does Social Security scams on the government to this day. They demand tithing from Social Security. Do you have to pay your stimulus tithing? No, you don't. Don't give it to the church. It's not theirs. It's the government money. It's yours to use. Understand, that's why Mormons have no clue. But Lex found out a few things, didn't she?